Okay, this is 180 milliseconds too late, the SSA Rocket League podcast, and with me today, Epidex and Faulcon. Now, if you're wondering who the hell they are, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but essentially, Epidex is Apex and Faulcon is DNMK. But Epidex, starting with you, who are you and what's your relationship with Apex?
That is a very laced question.
It's an astonishingly good question.
It is. Actually,
it's just a necessary one.
So my name is Jean. I've run a business called Apex since around 2010. We have an obsession for solving problems with technology, and the opportunity for us to enter the esports game became available sort of toward the end of last year, I believe it was. And we have a love for the game of Rocket League, love for gaming as a sector, and thought it would be a good time to enter. So myself and my business partner, I guess, jumped on that bandwagon, and fast forward a couple of months, and here we are.
All right, so you're intimately involved with the Apex Rocket League team, which is good to hear. And then Faulcon, your relationship with DNMK, and I know you've been with the team pre-DNMK days, so there's been a journey. So tell us about that.
Oh gosh, this is like it feels like it's been such a long time, but I don't even. So I think I've been with the team itself for probably over maybe a year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
But we recently joined DNMK. I think it was November last year.
Okay.
Which we were all kind of excited about. We got picked up by a big org and stuff. But my relation to the team is I manage them. I make sure they don't get up to any bad antics and stuff like that. that horrible dad that like comes in.
Keeping shit under control. Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, I try.
All right. Well, let me tell you why my thinking in getting the two of you here. And we're effectively going to be talking about the last regional 2 of Split 3, and the ups, the downs, the surprises where it all happened. But why I was keen to have the two of you here is I have been very impressed with and very pleased to see the progress of your two teams in this in the split, I beg your pardon, coming out of Regional 1 and Regional 2. So in Regional 1, okay, well, if we go a little bit further back, I felt that Apex and DNMK didn't perform as well as I would have expected them, given who was on those teams and kind of how it was going. And I don't know how you felt, and I'll give you the opportunity to talk about that. But then there seems to have been a resurgence in this split. Regional 1 saw a bunch of new teams, or the race for 3rd to 6th spots kind of get very crowded with Espionage and Nibble, and of course Digital Devils are in the mix there. But at the end of Regional 2, in my mind, I mean, the two teams that have kind of risen out of that little crowd has been Apex and DNMK. So I thought it would be pretty cool to have you guys in here to talk about that. So maybe let's start with you, Epidex. Just in terms of how you're feeling about your team, its progress. Are you happy with where they're going? What have been the big changes? Is the resurgence the result of specific work done? Paint the picture as best you can.
You want the podcast answer or the real answer?
Maybe both.
I think the podcast answer is that we're elated that we're challenging top 3. I think my honest answer is I believe we're a top 2 team.
Sure.
I still don't believe we're putting it together the way we should, and I think the team agrees with that wholeheartedly. Let me step back to the split that's passed. Brought in Christian W in place of Risen Eclipse, and the thinking there was to bring in someone a little bit newer to the sort of competitive side of Rocket League, give him an opportunity. He had been playing with Friction and Lackstar quite a lot anyway. There was quite a lot of chemistry established, and it didn't go, I think, the way we wanted it to. I don't think it went the way Christian really wanted it to. And it wasn't down to anything like personal or particular. I just don't think we had the time ahead of the first regional in that split to really get the system down. And then I think as the split played out, there was like mounting pressure on the player. There was like a weird expectation on the org, and so there's no hard feelings, but it didn't really work out the way we wanted. And then Panda became an option for us, and Panda really popped off in PWB. And Panda really has one split left, and I may be giving out a little bit too much too early, but Panda's off to France to study at the end of the split. So Panda will not be available in the region post the split. So we approached him and we said, look, we understand your reality, and do you want to kind of go out and fill a hole for us for the next little while?
Okay.
Shadow and I have been putting in a bunch of work on the analysis side, on the training side. We're scrimming very consistently. Of course, you have to balance that these kids are super young, so they're writing exams and they've got sort of social commitments and parental limitations.
Real life getting in the way.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting limitation to, it's an interesting nuance to work with.
Okay. And then Faulcon, DNMK, I mean, you also had quite a big roster change. Was that like the key factor, or were there a bunch of things with DNMK?
I think it was a bit of, we knew that there was a need for something that needed to change basically after our performance, which happened in Winter Split 3. I mean, Winter Split Regional 3, where we kind of finished, I think it was out of the top 8. So none of us were exactly happy with that at all. I mean, nobody would be happy with that.
Sure.
So I think it took a real toll on the players, especially, because they're very confident about where they should be placing amongst the top 8. And when that happened, they were just like, okay, what are we doing wrong? Or like they spoke to me and we were trying to like come up with ideas and stuff like this. I mean, the player that we did that did leave us, which was a part of that original roster, was Echo. And in Regional 3 we had to play our sub, which was Entity which he still is our sub at the moment. But I think there was just a difference of opinion at that time between the roster with Echo. So then it was a mutual agreement, and he wanted to go. And obviously, he's got other options that have become available to him, with him going over to USA on a scholarship, which was great for him. We wished him all the best and stuff like that. There was no problem with him leaving, but then it came to going back to the drawing board, because now we need to find someone to replace him. And that's when we started looking around, and then we saw that the Lost Legion Giants, they basically all disbanded. And when we did have matches against Lost Legion Giants, I think most of our focus, we were more impressed by Defunct on the team, on that roster. So I messaged Defunct and I was like, hey, do you want to maybe try out for our roster? We're looking for a third. So they gave it a whirl, and then it was like first, what should we say, scrum that we did with him. It looked fantastic. The cohesion between the team was just like, it was better than what we thought it would be, and it was just like Defunct's playstyle complemented Casper and Josh especially. Okay, cool. We're gonna pick him up, and we're gonna go work with him for the next 2 months leading up to Sprint Split.
Okay.
So we put in a lot of work. I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
Like a lot of work over those 2 months, because in all fairness, it was basically a completely new roster in a sense with Defunct joining, because the playstyle completely changed. Obviously, you saw your Pego, all of a sudden he just popped off all of a sudden. It's because we've been working really hard with him, trying to get him into the swing of things with a player that we felt at the time, we feel complements Josh a lot better than what Echo did. for instance. No, nothing bad against Echo at all. I'm just,
Sure.
it's just what it is. It is what it is when it comes to
Okay.
these players. Yeah.
All
So we
right.
felt very confident.
And okay, so and just are you both sort of happy with the results where you finished off? I mean, sort of third and fourth respectively over the first two regionals. Are you happy with that as a progression? It's not necessarily as an end, but as a progression.
I think what was quite fitting in the last regional is that DD knocked Digital Devils knocked us down, and ATK knocked DNMK down, and then we ended up kicking out ATK, and DNMK did us the favor on Devils.
Yeah,
we also seem to have quite a good rapport with each other as orgs, sort of behind the scenes. There's a lot of mutual respect between the players. There's a good understanding of availability, and like, you know, you don't necessarily share that with all the teams. We've been told by one or two orgs that they won't scrim us because we're not good enough, and then you kick them out of RLCS, and that's poetic justice.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah, it's been wonderful.
I mean, I also kind of found it funny that like regional one, you guys kind of gave us a bit of a thrashing, which then Casper and Josh were like, this is not happening. So they kind of went on like, even though it was all like respectful and like nothing toxic, should we say? Like they were like, no, we're taking revenge on Apex. They're going down next regional.
Yeah.
Which they did. Okay, good. All right, fine. So that's the little bit of background on the two of you and your respective teams. And I realize now, asking you to talk about the regional overall, we acknowledge the bias with which your opinions will come, even if you think you're not. We know it has to. It's because you're obviously coming from your respective teams, but. And Falcon, let's start with you. What your overall impressions of the regional? What did you? What were the big surprises for you? Your thoughts of the regional, how it ended, the winners, the losers, and what you're looking for in regional 3.
Oh, you mean it as in like all the teams
together? The whole thing, the
no.
entire 16-man bracket there.
I mean, like for you guys on the casters desk, I mean, you guys have said it many times. It's very tough to decide on who's going to be coming in on that 4th, 3rd, or like 6th, 5th. We just don't know because the teams those teams such as Nibble, Team Espionage, we're all kind of very close together in. I mean, Team Espionage have like come out of nowhere.
Yes.
When they picked up Sakino, and that caught us a little bit by surprise. I mean, we were just this past regional. We were lucky enough that we had a little bit of a change in our play style during the matches, just to stay in the regional, because they would have knocked us out early if we weren't on top of things there. But it's tough to say. I mean, for us, we were hoping to possibly beat ATK again.
Yes.
Which that didn't happen. We took them. It was almost exact identical series to the first regional. Unfortunately, mistakes happen, and they got that sneaky little goal in, and then they finished it off.
But it was a close series. I mean, if we go through there, it was close. Well, to be fair though, I mean, you guys DNMK made fairly heavy weather of your progress through the bracket. I mean, you were 5 games pretty much all the way with against ATK and then ICE. Very well against Digital Devils though, to be fair. Once we got to I mean, that was a 4-1 there, which is pretty good going.
Well, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, our series against ICE, we weren't exactly very happy with. No disrespect at all to the players in ICE whatsoever, but considering our previous placements and our players in the team, we shouldn't have even gone to a Game 5 series as we did. But I think for some reason we just underestimated the potential of that team, in all fairness. So what they did was fantastic.
Okay.
Gave my team a bit of a wake-up call. So, and then I will give credit a lot to Vitali, which is our acting coach at the moment. He stuck with the team, I think, after that series, and he spoke to them, and he got their mentality back up. And then when it came to the Digital Devils game, we just got to work and we did what we had to do. And same for Apex. No offense to Epidex, but well, we had to. Send you
Fair
guys
enough.
packing.
It's 1-1, and there's still a regional to come.
True.
A decider upcoming. Okay, so then Falcon, tell us about the lower bracket final, Bravado Gaming. How close do you feel DNMK is to Bravado? If that matchup is repeated, how do you rate your chances of taking them down there in Regional 3?
Look, so like Epidex, I do believe that my team has the potential to rival the top two. No problem. It's just what it comes down to at this point in time. I mean, we've shown against Digital Devils, we've shown against Apex, we've shown against also other tough rosters. Like we are more than capable of. We even Regional 1 when we surprised a lot of people by taking out 80k. I think when it just comes to playing against Pirates XD and Bravado, there's a mental block, which where the players do. I mean, it's normal for competitive like sports in any sport whatsoever. You're playing against a top 2, top 1 seed. It's like these guys always beat you. It's gonna be tough, like especially when you come close or you take a game or
Yes.
then it's like the excitement gets in, the adrenaline pumps through the veins. It's just how I definitely do think we will be able to catch up to them. It is going to take, realistically, it is going to take a little bit longer because fortunately for Bravado and Pirates XD, they're going to get that valuable experience going over to the US. And they'll start bringing those plays, like what they've learned, they'll bring it over to the SA, and then it's going to basically just cascade down from there, which is a great thing for the community, especially. But I do think we definitely can catch up to Bravado and Pirate XD.
All right. Well, I think we'll talk a little bit about what happens from here. But for now, Epidex, Falcon's raised a good point about the mentality, and I mean the huge story of this regional was Bravado taking down Pirates, who they've beaten before, but I think it was the manner in which they did it, getting knocked down in the upper bracket final, coming through the lower bracket, having to bracket reset, and then sweeping. It's huge, and a lot of my thinking as I was watching that was, I think for Bravado against XD, there is that same sort of mental issue. But I do think they did themselves huge favors because I think they overcame a number of mental issues around there to win in the manner that they did. And I don't know what your thoughts were around that progression and that result.
They're both fantastic teams with 6 fantastic players. And like a normal sport, the quality of your sleep, the quality of your mental, the atmosphere in the comms, the ability to make one thing happen that shouldn't have, or stop one thing from happening that should have, can literally turn a series. I think Bravado, so they've won 2 out of the 8. Pirates have got 6, and agree with Falcon. I think the exposure they're going to get in North America is massive. And I'm going to be bold and say it's the last big leap those 2 teams take ahead of the competition. I think without any prolonged I do think they're going to learn something while they're over in Texas, and I think they'll come back and be a couple steps ahead, and it will filter down into the scene. But I don't see that happening again for a while until we get sort of more prolonged exposure. So if someone goes over for a while, or a player comes in from one of those regions, like Sikeno has, but someone at a higher level, an 1800, 1900 player, I don't see one of those 2 teams taking another big stride for a while. So that's a promising thing for the scene, right? Because I think the more competition we have in the scene, the more interesting it is to watch, the more interesting it is to compete in. Having said that, I'll get back to your actual question.
Okay.
I think Bravado clutched up. I think they looked fantastic on the day. And I think in DNMK's credit, or to DNMK's credit, given Bravado on an average Bravado day, DNMK might even take that lower final. I think Bravado looked fantastic that day. They reverse swept. They then got the sweep, and you know, it is what it is. For Regional 3, I think based on our seedings, we play ATK in Game 2.
Okay.
I think so. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But if that's the case, if that is the case, then obviously given the trend, the split, we're feeling fairly confident on how that shapes up for us as well in Regional 3.
All right. Well, there's an interesting dynamic here for me is that, so Bravado and Pirates are going off to the US. That's like a massive, massive thing for them. But we are now, this was the first season, and this season was sprung on everybody. No one was expecting it. We were all caught a bit flat-footed. Auglis, which was the Apex team before you picked them up, Epidex, and then it was Atomic for DNMK. We were almost sort of all pressed into duty, like, oh shit, let's get a team together, let's make something happen. So there was no prep, no thinking, it was just a scramble. We've got to be in there. We've now got a season's worth of experience. And we've seen fantastic growth and the emergence of players that the broader community wouldn't have been aware of. We're seeing guys who I think are going to become superstars in the local scene. And given that experience and the fact that after the next regional, where everyone's back to square zero, it became clear very early on that it was going to be Bravado and Pirates, winning the thing. So none of the other teams are really fighting for a spot there. It was just do as best we can. But I think the dynamic now of all Team Zero with a bit of experience, that changes the whole dynamic of how we go forward with it, right?
Yeah,
any one of you can pick that up. I should have nominated someone, but go.
No, that's fine. I absolutely think you're spot on, Greybeard. So there's kind of the mental regain. Like there's everything to play for again. There's not someone with 600 points lead or 150 points ahead of you for wild contention or whatever the case is. I think we have seen some players that the scene maybe had in high renown not performed the way they should have. And I think, like you said, the emergence of some superstars or potential superstars. And I think what I'm really enjoying seeing is kind of these bubble teams form and reform. You think of Yankees with no Brim, and then, like it's great that these bubble players are like self-organizing and finding chemistry or cohesion in a way that suits them. And I think that's going to bode well for the next season. Because I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive. Also, Ice, big credit to Ice, which was the former PWB without the P. Doing really, really well. I think 5BS was benched that evolved and showing that he's a top 6 player, a top 16 player. So good on them. I think it's tremendously exciting. And what I'm interested to see is with the change in dynamic, like some kids want to go off and focus on Matrix, so they might not be competing next season, or there's going to be new kids that are eligible next season. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think without this predisposition of it's done and done, these two teams are done and confirmed.
Yes,
I think it's going to be a much more interesting season.
I think so too.
And okay, well now let's look a little bit ahead because. From what I can tell, the next season, the 22-23 season, is going to kick off in around October. And if we thought the 10-week gap between Split 2 and 3 was a large one, holy moly, 4 months, like sort of around 20 weeks, twice that. So much can change. And Falcon, if we start with you, I don't know if you guys have even discussed or thought about that break, that gap, and what happens in that time. How do you keep fresh? How do you get yourselves to the next level? What thought has there been paid to that massively long gap coming up?
Well, you see, it mostly, other than scrims, we don't always have a lot of other things to keep the players like on form, should we say? Apart from local tournaments, which do happen every now and then. I mean, you have your ACGL, which they do their weekly cash tournaments every now and then. I do know VS is still ongoing, which we are taking part in, even though a lot of the teams are not taking it as seriously as they would have if it was the only
Yes.
form of like actual competition we have in this country. But I do know that VS we just finished with the second leg and it's going into the third leg now, and then it's the championship after that still, which that should probably still run into August, I think, if I'm correct, which it was like last year. So I think there will still be that form of competitiveness that will still be there. It won't be as like, I don't know, how do I put this, high level as it would be, or high stakes as it would be for like as if it was RLCS and stuff like that. But I suppose, because there's also a lot of change, like things that I'm also pre-planning now from coming into that break as well, which I can't discuss at this point.
No,
in
fair
time.
enough, fair enough. Okay, well then, Epidex, I'm going to a similar question to you, and yours is slightly more complicated in that you know you're going to be losing what has become a star player, which you know, you sharing that news, it's the first I've heard of it, and it's a little sad because he's just such an incredible player, but you know beforehand that that's going to be a hole to fill. So Apex, where does Apex go between now and 4.5 months time?
Yeah, so we've got some plans. We've been speaking to a couple of I think interesting potential signings. And I think that's sort of the function of the org, right? It's to attract and retain the talent and keep the talent stimulated and find ways to grow during these downtimes. And that's certainly what we've got our eyes set on. Some of it's, in fact, most of it's probably a little too early to talk about.
Sure.
But I was very, very close to propositioning you for sort of a 10-week scrim series that we could stream live, you know.
Okay.
I mean, why don't we just do our own local kind of thing? I mean,
Exactly. So, you know, I'm sure we'd be happy to front some cash and get the team scrimming in like a pro 6-man's type environment where the teams are not set to Apex and DNMK and Pirates, but sort of we take the top, whatever, 60 players in the region, form 20 teams and have some scrum weeks, you know?
Well, I think that's, I mean, as you have both been talking, I've been trying to think about how, I mean, there is VS Gaming and it's vital that they continue, but it does feel like there needs to be more. And yeah, sorry, it's not necessarily a podcast conversation because now I'm thinking, how do we go and find a sponsor, someone who will come and chuck in a good deal of cash to make it worth the while for people to keep going? But maybe Epidex or Faulcon or whatever, we can talk about that and see how. Let's go find some people and make that happen, because I think that's going to be very important to do. Now, I have a question about boot camping. I mean, it would be a wonderful thing, and I just don't know how practical it is, viable it is from a time perspective, a cost perspective. You know, you send off the DNMK team or the Apex team to EU for like 4 or 5 weeks and have them scrim 12 hours a day with EU bubble teams, and if it can be organized, you know, some of the pro teams there. Epidex, I don't know. I don't know if that's something you've thought of, or how you would feel about that, and how realistic it would be to organize that, or what would have to be in place for that to be a thing.
Yeah, I guess bigger prize pools in the RLCS SSA would help, certainly. But on a serious note, I think I just want to come back to like boot camps in the traditional sense before we maybe talk about the off season.
Okay.
I think it's been huge. I think teams that have boot camped have looked fantastic. Bravado did it in the last regional; they won. DNMK had 2 players boot camping. We saw a very proud mum and dad tweet, which was fantastic to see. But I genuinely mean this. Yopego's not looked better than he did in the last regional. So I think it's massive, and I think as the scene I hope solidifies and becomes a more viable proposition financially. Orgs can get behind investing in that sort of thing more frequently. We had planned it for when Christian W was still on the team. It didn't quite work out, school and exams and parents and whatever the case was, but we were quite excited to experiment with that, and we may still be for Regional 3. We're just waiting on one or two things. But again, we'd only have the two players sort of boot camping because of Panda, sort of not even being in the country. So I think that's that. In terms of EU, we do have Shadow as a coach, so we're slightly privileged in that our players get to play sort of bubble players in EU, but they do it at a 200 ping disadvantage. So they're playing 1800, 1900 lobbies, which is great exposure. There's great learning in replay reviews there. It's really upping their level of consistency. But you can't really tell if the potential is being met when a player has, a fifth of a second delay.
Yes.
So would we love to? Yeah. I mean, when Snowy went over, he became a top 100 once play in like a week. He climbed into the top 100. I'm serious.
Absolutely.
I think there's. I don't think this region's as bad as Twitch chat would have us believe, but to have the opportunity to do that, I think the scene needs to be probably 30-40% more viable than it is at the minute.
Sorry, Faulcon, I'm coming to you in a second, but Epidex, when you say 30 to 40% more viable, in what sense?
Financially. For us, in order to accommodate a team in Europe for 8 weeks is not a cheap exercise.
Isn't it?
And then imagine with the strength of the rand.
Well, I suppose if maybe you're Pirate 60 or Bravado earning the top prizes, then maybe.
Pre the Psionics tax, but exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That 30% deduction is quite harmful if you think about it.
No, it's brutal. All right, Faulcon, I'd like your response to that general thing, the boot camping in general, and then I want to close with a sort of futuristic look. But Faulcon, go ahead.
Well, I think I share a lot of the same views as Epidex does on that, especially when it comes to like boot camping in like a different country or a different region, for instance. It's quite difficult considering the position we're in South Africa when it comes to esports. But we have fortunately, it's possible to have Casper and Defunct play alongside each other because they pretty much live with what should we say, less than an hour from each other.
Yes.
Obviously, your Pego, he stays in Neisner, so it's a bit of a tough one there to get him to have to go
Sleepy
to
Neisner, yes.
So, but from Casper and Defunct's point of view, just having them just sitting next to each other is like a huge improvement, especially from a comms perspective, because we've also discovered that there's Discord delay.
Yeah.
And that does kind of harm us in a few areas, especially when it becomes quite intense when you have 3 Bravado players shooting at your neck. So.
Yeah, no, they're sort of like, I've got it, and already there's 2 of you up in the air. It's like, oh, okay.
I mean, I'd love if I could, and if we had the funds to be able to do it, I'd love to have, not every single waking second, but have the players be able to boot camp at least together so they can build that morale within the team and that relationships with each other, build those relationships with each other, and become more than just a team. But I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, well then I'd like to close with this, and I'll start with you, Faulcon. Is we don't know, we're pretty certain. So SSA was an experimental region, which is why we're sort of when you see all the RLCS stuff, there's a bit of an asterisk with SSA. It's like, and it's South America and APAC and OCE and MENA and SSA, but I do think we've done ourselves in so many aspects. We've done ourselves very proud, and I do believe we've done enough for us to become an ongoing part of the global RLCS scene. So what would you like to see in terms of format and SSA's involvement next season?
Oh my gosh, format.
Well, when I say format, like, okay, what would make it better for SSA next season? Having come through, and we're very grateful and very happy we've had the season we've had. But what would be better for SSA next season?
In all fairness, I think, and everybody would probably agree with me in this one, but I think we want a major spot at least. A chance to at least have that consistency of one of our teams going over to one of those international lands to gain that experience. Even, I mean, that will like going back to what Epidex said earlier in regards to having teams get more of that exposure. I mean, obviously, we all also do want that podcast, not podcast, sorry, the official broadcast for us as well, especially for you guys. So we don't have to have this issue of us possibly not having a broadcast, because we need that. We need to get the whole of SSA out there, and that's we can only do that by streaming what we have at this point in time. And I think the production team and the admins that we do have done a brilliant job with what they have. For this season that we did have, I think they made this season look a hell of a lot more than what it was intended to be, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing, and like well done to those.
Sure, absolutely. No, that was a stunning job by them, absolutely.
But I think what we have, we would love to be a part of that official RLCS setting. And we would love to have a major spot. I mean, I think we're very fortunate to even been able to get 2 wildcard spots.
Yeah.
Which I think we're very fortunate to have even gotten, considering we're an experimental region, especially.
All right, Epidex, your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
what would you like to
my
see?
Words. The way the season shaped up became a marathon that was outsprinted. You know, that got sprinted by Pirates and Bravado, really, while other teams were figuring some things out.
Exactly.
And I think what that major spot gives us is more to play for on a split by split basis. And I think you'd see people working twice as hard, because now there's work and there's effort and there's grind and there's motivation, but I think it's in fits and spurts, and I think it's it depends on how much a particular individual is introspected in a particular week. Where if you know you're fighting for something in the next 6 weeks, you kind of double down on it. And I wanted to comment on the Echo bursary or scholarship, or I'm not sure the technical term. What a fantastic opportunity, or incentive for players to have difficult conversations with people who may be limiting them for exploring esports, than to say, I can get an NA or an EU scholarship if I play a video game really well. And in a structured manner, under an org that treats me professionally, I can make a little bit of an income in the interim. I think it's fantastic. Back to what the region needs, a major spot would be amazing. An official broadcast, so that some unsung heroes don't need to be out of pocket to put on productions at the last minute. Looking at you, Greybeard, and but kudos to Elliot and the production team, and to you, and to the ESL admins, and to everyone who's made the region run like an official region. Honestly, it's been nothing short of exceptional. The communication's been fantastic. I don't have as could we get the asterisks removed and a spot in the major every 6 weeks would be fantastic.
All right, good. Well, I think that probably sums it up. I mean, for me, there's been a debate a little bit, but what depends on who you speak to about the major spot. Because, of course, the concern is that, we get a major spot and we go into the LAN and get absolutely hammered, which may or may not happen, and we might be doing ourselves a disservice by assuming we would be completely hammered. But I do like there's an argument by Lawler and by Johnny Boy who've said that, the best in a region must go. Because the complaint is, we're giving a major spot to a shitty team when a much better EU team or NA team could fill that spot. And But no. This is the best of this region. They need to go and represent their region, hammered or not. This is where we get the experience, where we learn, where we begin to understand where we are relative to the rest of the world and how we improve it. So I'm very much behind that. I'd love to see a major spot. I also would like our prize pool to match APAC, which is, to take it up from $15,000 up to $30,000. I think that, to your point earlier, Epidex, that now we're starting to get into, I think for those who've earned a bit of money, the tax notwithstanding, it's been amazing for, when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, you're getting a few dollars for a game that was giving you nothing, it's nice. But if we're going to elevate it and make a serious, to have conversations with parents about a rooted child, it just starts to shape that conversation. And to your point again, Epidex, the thing with the scholarship for Echo is huge. I mean, and that is a direct result of RLCS. Eric's experimental asterisk or not, that would not have happened. That would not exist if RLCS had not come here. So we have to acknowledge how awesome this has been. And without it, I mean, Faulcon, I don't know if you'd even be bothering with Atomic, trying to manage a team that's, what's the point? It's like, okay, yet another scrim, maybe a free ACGL here or there. And Apex, you guys wouldn't be involved. What would be the point? No. So there've been massive things, and I just get very excited about the potential. We're on the launching pad, and now we can do something with it. But we're now under risk of waffling on far too much. So I want to thank you both for coming on, and really I was enormously pleased to see how well your teams have done. Because you were both, those two teams were very much a part of the conversation in the first split. The second split, it seemed to sort of fall away a bit, and it was like, damn, what's happening? And starting with this third split, I wasn't expecting much from either. It was like, okay, let's see how they go. But to see how you've both teams have performed in Regional 1 and 2, it's fantastic. And I do think you've climbed a little bit out of that crowd, to make a serious argument for sort of third and fourth spot, which is great. And I wish you and your teams the best of luck coming up in the last regional of the last split of our first season in RLCS. So Epidex and Faulcon, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Peace.
Thank you very much.